All I can keep thinking of is what was the Life of Brian? Bring out your dead, and then they weren't dead. They'd hit them. That's a terrible one. That's a terrible quote to remember.
Bring out your dead.
We'll
tweet that. Welcome to this week's episode of the WP Elevation podcast. I'm Ginny McAninny and I work at WP Elevation and I'm one of your podcast hosts. Today I am interviewing the legendary Bob WP. If you haven't heard of Bob before, I don't know where you've been because he is Mr. WordPress. He's been in the WordPress space since around 2007, starting off with training, doing webinars, some online courses, and doing a lot of things with beginner WordPress people. So he graduated from that to now doing his 3 podcasts, one of them focusing very heavily on e-commerce. So he's often seen as the e-commerce expert in the WordPress space. I highly recommend you tune into this podcast because we're talking about in-person networking. Yes, if you're a little bit afraid of going out and meeting fellow WordPressers, this episode is for you. You're going to love it. Stay with us.
This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Welcome to the WP Elevation podcast, Bob WP. I'm getting my B's and Bobs mixed up. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks. I'm enjoying it already. This is, it's a bodcaster though.
The Bobcast. All right, now before we get into stuff, I need to talk to you about something very serious. I hear that you are a Fawlty Towers fan. Is that correct?
Oh man. Oh God, I love Fawlty Towers. I mean, we have the whole collection on DVD and we watch it over and over and over. It's the best thing in the world. I mean, I grew up on Monty Python.
Love Monty Python.
Yeah, it was like this is me or something.
Yes. And when I heard that you like that and Fawlty Towers, we grew up on Fawlty Towers as well. And even my kids, they when they were little, they'd hear quotes from Fawlty Towers and never know, they haven't even seen the episodes, but they knew. My favorite was, I think one time, Manuel thought he'd killed him and he's there saying, "I love you, Mr. Fawlty, Mr. Fawlty."
Oh, that voice, you've got it down.
It was my favorite. So give us a little bit of a background about you. You've been in this industry for a long time. I know you've been sort of since 2007 in doing WordPress things, but long 20-year history. So give us a bit of background.
Yeah, I actually, since a lot of fun. See, I'm already messing up too. Freelancers actually listen. I think I started freelancing graphic design. I hate to say this because it's going to age me, but in the late 80s. And then shortly after that, my wife and I decided to start a marketing graphic design business. And we ran that for about 23 years. So that was, during the time of print, all the good stuff, that actually stuff you had to hold. And I got into the web maybe it was like mid 90s, HTML sites. I hated it. I thought I don't want to do this. And then, so that, fast forward to 2007, where I discovered WordPress, started playing around with that, and I was still doing design. So I dabbled in design for quite a few years off and on there. But at one point, I just started doing more coaching and training, and I found out that's what I really loved. And that was probably around 2010 or so. And I just took that and ran with it and been doing that up till about a year or two ago. And now I'm just basically podcasting and blogging. So I'm really trying to just focus on my site, get into the monetization mode or whatever. And I don't do client services anymore. I did, when somebody tells me and they're 23 years old and they say, "I'm tired of client services," I'm like, "Oh, don't even talk about it. Talk to the hand, It's like, oh, no. It's, so I was finally tired of it. I just thought, I've done enough of that and wanted to get out of that. And right now I'm loving it. I wish I could say I'm just sitting around and, sitting on the beach, which is not that far from us, but I get down there very seldom. And when I do, I'm usually not making money. I still have to come back here to make money. So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And are you enjoying the more creative side of it now, being able to do the podcasting and the blogging?
Yeah. And that I've really, I mean, we've been doing the blog. I've been doing the blog off and on for almost since the inception of, using WordPress. The last 5 or 6 years, been blogging quite a bit. So I built that up, and I was always doing, tutorials, that kind of stuff. So the content has always been there. I just was able to do more and then kind of get into the podcasting, which I actually did my first podcast in 2014. And that was a little bit over a year, and I took a break from it, kind of a long break, and was waiting for that moment to come when I had a decent idea, because the first one was kind of boring to me. I thought, I called it WP Breakdown, which was kind of had two meanings there in a way. But it was a short podcast, and it just didn't really, I wasn't real excited about it. So I had to kind of sit back and reevaluate.
So you sat back and reevaluated, and then you've come back stronger than ever with 3 podcasts.
Yeah, insanity. I just, I don't really know what I'm doing half the time. I'm thinking, I look at it and I think, okay, I'm putting out content every day, but it's a mix between the blog and the podcast. And sometimes I don't know, it just seems a little insane, but it's fun. I enjoy it. How do
you juggle doing all of that? Say the 3 podcasts. How do you keep on top of all of that?
It's really just, I do have I spend most of my time, it's like between content, creating content and marketing it. So I have a schedule. Sometimes I wish I had a method to my madness, but it's really, I'm kind of an erratic person, and as long as I've been doing this, I'm a huge multitasker. And I know a lot of people say that's not the way to do it, but I can juggle a lot of things. So I moved from things real quickly. I need to do this. That can set aside. I can go back to it and pick up on it easily. So it's sometimes like right now I'm about a week out in content, which is one of those moments that I just love. I'm thinking I'm booked, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's, 1 hour out till content. So there's not, it's just
fine line.
Yeah. It's a mix between scheduling myself, and like you do here, scheduling the actual interviews, doing all the editing. And it's a constant juggle and making sure everything's going to be when you expect it.
I want to start talking about networking, because I know you've got some great information for us on that. But before that, still sticking with the podcasts, I suppose a lot of our audience, podcasts sort of seem to be the in thing at the moment. People want to do it, but to get their name out there and build an audience. Do you find that having done everything you did, you had a bit of a following before you started the podcasting, which made it easier, or you've actually built more of a following from the podcast? It's
been kind of interesting, my transition, because basically the last several years I've been really focused on beginners. So that's what a lot of my content was. And there was a point where I decided to transition more to WordPress, but get a little bit heavier on the e-commerce side of things. And that's where the podcast came in too, because I was starting to do that with my site itself, with the content I was putting out as a blog. But then the podcast was like, okay, I thought, how can I make this transition and not, turn off all the people I've been dealing with, beginners, and move into the e-commerce space? And actually went quite smooth. There was a lot of luck involved there, and there was some strategy. So I built up, I've kept some audience, but I'm building up a new audience because I'm starting to focus more on the e-commerce side of things. I'm still keeping a lot of the old audience, and because of the archives on my blog. So it is kind of a juggling. And when I was actually kind of focusing on my email list, it was really interesting because it was staying steady, because I was constantly getting subscribers and unsubscribers because people were like, whoa, he's talking too much about e-commerce now. I'm out of here. The other people, oh, now he's talking about that, so now I'm going to sign up. So there was some leveling out there as far as the audience, but the transition's been where it's continued to grow, which is good.
And it's interesting. I think having those three different types of podcasts, you can sort of relate to a lot of different people in the space. Because I know the e-commerce one, you know, you can relate to shop owners there as well as developers. So I like the way that you're covering all bases.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that thing where, niche down, make sure you focus down so much, but it all kind of falls under the umbrella of e-commerce and monetization in one way or another.
And how are you finding that with the e-commerce? Are you finding, obviously there's been such growth in that area. So are you finding that there's a lot of interest in that area with the podcast and blogging?
Is. And one of the main reasons, it's really kind of a selfish reason I started focusing on e-commerce a bit more, was when I looked at monetizing my site and I looked at my history with affiliate marketing and the different things I was doing, even sponsorships, I saw that it was obvious that the audience that is using, more into e-commerce, making an investment in their business, are willing to spend more money, whether it's through affiliates or whatever, versus beginners. So that transition, because I knew that realistically, I knew I couldn't really monetize a site for beginners because I'd been doing that. I had so much content on there. It's like, what can I charge for now? All the stuff is here. So I had to find a way to use e-commerce. And because I started the podcast originally with WooCommerce, with the popularity of WooCommerce and just the direction everything's going, and I've been involved with WooCommerce since its inception, it seemed like a no-brainer. So it's worked really well.
That's good. Now let's move on to the networking side of things. I'm really keen to know how you've sort of grown your audience, and you've been in the industry, and you were saying even before you started getting into web design and training, I'm sure you would have built up a network through what you were doing and had some lessons that you learned there. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have this. Sometimes I look at the WordPress community and I look at networking. I hear people talking, networking, and I love to go to a WordCamp because of networking. And I go back to my days way back. I mean, when networking was, you would go to Chamber of Commerce events and people would shove business cards in front of your face, and everybody was, had their scripts and their agendas. It's like, I'm going to meet so many people. Over time, it's changed and it's not changed. I mean, I found that one of the things I found when I was networking early, especially we're talking, in person versus social, because social's great, it's comfortable, you get online, you talk with people, there's a lot less anxiety there instead of that one-on-one, even meeting and, new people, if it's on Facebook or whatever. So for me, it was when I started doing in-person networking as a freelancer, even, I was nervous. It was like, I got to talk to people. I got to introduce myself. And everybody kept telling me over the years, there was people that would actually have businesses that they would teach you strategies to network. So you would go through and you would have a plan. And it was like, come up with your elevator speech. And I would hear people with their elevator speeches, and I'd feel like I was putting a quarter in a slot in them, because I'd meet them, and it's like they would just do this, ba 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 ba, and then it'd be over with. It's like, okay, well, you have that memorized, don't you? And so there was that, and then there were a lot of people that would have, and they would teach you this. They'd say, have a strategy, have goals. You're going to meet this many people. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And the more I tried to do that, the more I became even more stressed out, because you'd be at this event and you would think, okay, if I'm supposed to meet 5 new people, that's insane. I've talked to this person for 2 hours. So I spend this last 10 minutes running around and quickly meeting 4 more. So the minute I told myself I'm going to any event, whether it was a conference or whatever, with no expectations, that's when it started working for me. It was, I just said, I'm going to be relaxed. I don't care if I walk away, if I meet one new person, 10 new people, if I make a deal, if I don't make it, none of that's going to matter. And that's when actually things started happening for me. So kind of fast forwarding I believe it was I don't know if it was 2002 or so, when we were closer to Seattle, there was a online community called biznick.com. They don't exist anymore. but they were all over and they were headquartered in Seattle. And their thing was that it was a mix of in-person and online networking, which was really ideal because you would make these relationships online and you would meet people in these local events, lunches, whatever, and you would build that relationship. And it was just this constant back and forth. And some of those people, years later, they've come to me for something just because of that relationship we built.
Yeah.
So I think it really is, and I think the challenge for WordPress community and the people I see, because a lot of people in the WordPress community are, they work by themselves, they're secluded, they're nerds, they're geeks, and they're introverts, and they don't want to deal with human beings as much any more than they have to, especially strangers. So when I hear them say, "Oh, I can't wait to go to a WordCamp and network," what they basically mean is, I can't wait to go to a WordCamp and meet everybody I know and party with them and talk about business and have a good time, which is a big part of networking, is that, continuing to build that relationship. But they don't realize the other element is meeting new people, making that effort. And that's where the biggest challenge comes in, is actually going up to people you don't know. And sometimes, at events, people don't make it that easy to be approachable, even though in reality they are approachable when they're gathered in their own little groups talking and somebody's saying, "I really want to meet so-and-so," but they're over there talking to three others supposedly important people, and I'm just going to stand back here and hope to God I get to say something to that person. So there's a lot of ways that I think you can, when you're doing that in-person networking, that you can make it work for both ways.
So what about those who are introverted? Because I know sometimes, even say WordCamp might be just that step that is a bit out of their comfort zone, but it's still doable. So what sort of advice can you give, first of all, what sort of advice, but then, give us some other ideas of some other places where this networking can happen?
Yeah, I think, at WordCamps anywhere, I used to always tell people, and I even try to keep this habit with me, is, don't make an agenda of, okay, if you want to meet certain people, that can be a challenge in itself, because you have to find them at the right spot at the right time, and you might feel intimidated or whatever. But often, if you see somebody standing by themselves, and this seems so like a no-brainer, make a point to kind of wander over. They may be standing by themselves, and it may not work at all. It may be a big bomb that's dropped. You'll figure out that they were doing that for a very good reason, that they don't want to talk to anybody in the world. But likely look for those people that are kind of the wallflowers hanging around, and go up to them and just, "Hi, I'm, how you enjoying WordCamp?" I mean, it's almost something you just have to, there's no really magic bullet. And it's, like I said, it can be hard. And I also think that people that know a lot of people there, it's kind of our responsibility too, if we meet somebody new, to take them over and introduce them to somebody else. So it's not always in the hands of that introverted person. And sometimes they just, no matter what, you've got to kind of help push them a little bit and say, "Oh, let me take you over and have you meet, Troy Dean. He's standing over here. He's into online courses, and I know we were just talking about that. You'll love meeting him." So we've got to also make an effort to help those people, because some of those people, no matter what, they're going to be, they're just not going to do anything. They're going to pretend they're looking at their phone. And that's, everybody's, and that's a natural thing. It's like, oh, I don't want to just stand here and look like an idiot. I'm going to get on my phone because I don't quite know what to do right now.
Yeah.
So, and then the other, I think, there's the meetups that they have. I mean, there's WordPress meetups. There's really, you kind of have to, it depends on your goal. I can go back to the days of Chambers of Commerce, which I'm not sure what your version of Chambers of Commerce is, but we have them all over and they still exist. I'm not sure why they still exist, but they must exist for a reason. But, there are people there that what you're going to do is you're going to find, when you go to events, that some people go to events with huge agendas, And that if that business community, give you an example. Here's a real quick example. Back then, when you would go to a chamber event, you would see a lot of realtors, financial people, and those are the two big ones. The realtors were there because they're just always, they're crazy animals. The financial people and the insurance people were always there because they have no other option. They're because of the industry, they're limited on advertising. They're limited on everything they can do. So one of the few things they can do is go to these events. And sometimes you'll go in and the first 5 people you meet are all insurance people. And you think, my God, is this an insurance meetup? But they don't know where else to go. So they're there. And of course they're going to, so you're going to have to find events, test them out and see who the people are there, because it may not be the people that you want to connect with one way or another.
That's a good point. So find out whether the people there are who you want to connect with and whether the style is the style for you. So, you were saying, I love what you were saying about you found it very staged, and that made you even more anxious. And I think some people might like the rigidity of that, but I think I'd be like you. I want to throw that away and just be myself. Right. And I know my husband had a plumbing business, and we were in a small coastal town, and so we joined the BNI network up there. I know you have BNI in the US as well. And again, that's not for everyone, and I don't think it was for him because he had to practice the 1 minute elevator pitch of who he is and what he does, and he just was so uncomfortable with it. And he went to a few and he did okay, but it just wasn't his style, wasn't for him, and so he sort of had to find other ways to network, and he did that in various other ways. So
those can be very intimidating, and they actually have, you got to meet so many people and you got to do so many, all this stuff and some people really make it work. I've met people that have been incredibly successful, but those for me, that was like the total opposite. I knew, when first time I went to one, it was like, whoa, I got to get out of here. I got to go to a bar. This is way too much,
Exactly. It's about finding your style. So I think that's really, really important. So we're talking in-person networking. So do you still think it's really important? So as WordPress developers, we are, often isolated. We've got so many opportunities for this online, but do you still see that's a really crucial part of networking and building up things, that in-person networking?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be, no matter, I can't say it's always going to be because who knows what the future holds. But right now, the beauty of social is building up that relationship beforehand, and it may be, you may take it to a certain level or not, online. But a lot of times, and it kind of goes back to that meeting the people that but there is a different connection once you meet that person that you've talked to online when you've met them in person. And you'll never have that connection again. And that's when like I said, when we were first involved with that first social community back in the early 2000s or whatever, it was that way. You would talk to somebody, then when you would see them at events, like them, you'd run up, hug them, whatever. It's like, wow, I feel like I've known you forever. And it really, that in person, I don't know what you can say to describe the uniqueness of the in-person relationship, but there is something about that face-to-face. And for myself, I don't go to as many WordCamps as I used to, but that's primarily what I go to WordCamps for, is to see those people in person, because it's just really puts it at a different level in your relationship. And you can, I hate to say this, but it might also show you where the true relationships online are and where they aren't. You think you have this great relationship with somebody online, and you get with them in person and you see they're kind of ignoring you. You might think, whoa, what happened? And don't they like how I smell, or, there's something here going on because we're in person? But it's whatever. It can really, and I'm not saying that should be a goal, but it can, you can find, and you will find out people. And then the interesting thing with social is, our gravatars, are what we look like. And that's why I've always been adamant about, putting up a picture that for people can recognize you in person, because you don't want that person kind of going, whoa, wow. Was that like 30 years ago, your picture? I'm sorry, but you had a lot more hair or something,
Oh, I think that is so true. I love that. You've just got to be honest and got to be real, don't you?
Yeah. Because it can be and I've had people come up to me and I'm like, wow, I don't say anything, but I just think to myself, hey, absolutely nothing like the photo, and it doesn't change our relationship, but it does kind of take you back for a minute,
Yeah.
And then you obviously have a visualization in your head from there on in when you're looking at them online. Oh no, you don't look like that. Come on, you can't fool me.
Oh, it's so true. I love it. Well, that's why I find and I like the organization or the group that you've said that doesn't exist anymore, but they had a good mix of online socializing and then you could go in groups. And I found that even at WP Elevation, although the members are all over the world, some of them have now started organizing their own meetups and they get to meet each other, talk from that. And there's been some partnerships formed from that. And I think maybe that's a good way to approach it. If you are nervous about that in person, sort of look for things where you can maybe start online and then sort of move to then meeting them, whether it be at a meetup or WordCamp or something like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, Bob, I've got to wrap this up, and I'm having so much fun talking to you. And like anyone who's in WordPress knows of you, and I just love what you do, and all our audience. We often refer to you and the different things that you do. So thanks for bringing so much to the WordPress space. We love what you do and all your talent and knowledge. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Now you're embarrassing me. No.
Where can we reach out and tell you how much we love you?
Yeah. Well, you can go to bobwp.com, and I just basically tell people go anywhere and put in Bob WP in the search.
Yeah.
Even Google can find me.
Yeah.
They're pretty good at it. But yeah, I'm at Bob WP on Twitter and Bob WP just about everywhere. So that's the best way. I'm everywhere.
And the e-commerce podcast is fantastic, and the blogs that you do, but you've got some great stuff on e-commerce. So anyone who's doing e-commerce sites, it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. And to finish off, I want a favorite quote from one of your Monty Python movies. What's your favorite
quote?
Oh,
man. Let's see. Movies. The favorite movies. Oh, man. I have such a lousy memory. All I can keep thinking of is, what was The Life of Brian? Bring out your dead. And then they weren't dead, they would hit them. That's a terrible one. That's a terrible quote to remember.
Bring out your dead. We'll tweet that.
I wish I had a quote from the scene of the Holy Grail where he's fighting the knight. And he keeps losing appendages, and he just stands there. Come back, I'll bite you. Maybe that's it, because he's a little stub on the ground. We're getting weird here. I'm sorry, but
Monty Python is weird. We can't go anywhere else. Yeah. All right, Bob, thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
That was a fun interview. I really like Bob WP. He's such a genuine guy. So if you want to learn more about Bob or see the show notes or the video, if you've been listening in, make sure you head over to wpelevation.com/BobWP. Nice and easy. And as always, we'd love you to help us out on iTunes. Show everyone how much you love us. Go over to wpelevation.com/iTunes to give us a rating and review. As always, you can download the tools we use document if you head over to the website as well. And that's a handy little one for you guys to see how we run our business here at WP Elevation. Until I see you on the next episode of the podcast, go elevate.